you recently watched the Academy Award-winning Giant Lizard film that was very popular at the end of last year, and then managed to take home, was it best special effects, not best foreign film?
I think it might have been. Was it nominated for best foreign?
No, and it was Zone of Interest got best foreign film as a British film. It's always funny to me when this is not related to the conversation, but it's like, do British films really count as foreign films anymore? I mean, is
like Canadian films? Like, does Canada even have a film industry?
Probably
not.
Is James Bond a foreign film? That's mostly a European. That's mostly an English production.
I feel like more American guys watch James Bond.
Yeah, but it's made in England, and it's funded by British studios, isn't it?
And it's funded by the taxpayers. It always seems like every time there's a film industry in some foreign country, they always feel like they're doing it. You know what I'm talking about. Like the taxpayers somehow are giving it a bit of a kickback.
I love how our discussion on Godzilla -1 begins with a discussion on
the British
James Bond.
The British and James Bond.
I'm just saying, looking at the Wikipedia page for the most recent James Bond film, it's a co-production with the United Kingdom and the United States, and the UK is listed first. So isn't that technically a foreign film?
MGM. Well, I think it's because like Amazon's like an American company. North America and Universal International.
No, production company.
Production company. MGM. Yeah, that's Amazon.
Eon is a British film production that produces James Bond films.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I'm just saying that I don't even know. I don't think that I believe that British films qualify as foreign films at this point. I think that globalization has led to, if you speak English, you're an American film.
Yeah, I kind of feel like that might be the case too.
But anyway, a film that doesn't speak English, Godzilla -1.
Godzilla -1 is kind of a different spin on the Godzilla films. It does feature the big Godzilla himself, and it's sort of a different take on like the whole, like, it's not really related to like the Shin Godzillas. It's more similar to, I would say, like the original Godzilla, but what's occurring is that it sort of sets it up, not really like the Raymond Burr version of Godzilla, and like was like the late 50s, early 60s, or whatever it was. It's pretty much like during and immediately following World War II Japan. It is very much more human character driven, as opposed to just like the big monster destroying things, and that's pretty much the focus of it. So this is where it's giving more of a storyline between the individuals and the characters that have to deal with this onslaught of Godzilla, and I would say it's kind of like a refreshing reboot, I guess you would say, of the Godzilla, of the original Godzilla film, in a sense.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting dichotomy it's interesting to compare this film to Shin Godzilla, which came out in 2016, but was the last Japanese Godzilla film that was released.
Correct.
Because that film was extremely clinical. There was very little humanity in it. Everything was more about the bureaucracy of Japan and the Japanese government.
ですから、総理、自衛隊の運用や国民の避難など、政府による事案対処のあらゆる統合が必要です。直ちに災害緊急事態の布告の宣言をお願いします。
Did you ever see Shin Godzilla?
No.
Okay.
I know it's part of the Hideaki Anno Shin trilogy.
Shin Cinematic Universe.
Shin Cinematic Universe. The only one I've seen, which, well, you did also, was Kamen Rider. I haven't seen Ultraman. I don't really hear it come up much in conversation though for the Shin stuff, but I think he didn't direct it. It was more like he just produced it, or Studio Kara produced it. He
wrote Shin Ultraman, but Shin Kamen Rider was his baby, was what he wanted to do. Shin Godzilla was a co-directed, co-written thing.
Oh, okay.
But there's a lot of Anno's style very obviously involved in it. And it honestly reminded me more of the Patlabor movies, where they're cutting to big boardrooms, lots of people talking about how to do things, how to get approval to do things, what other countries are doing. And so it's very like clinical. Whereas this film is entirely human stories, human will, human driven, emotion based storytelling.
Yeah, it's kind of like a refreshing take on the whole monster thing, where it's more like nobody, like in the old Godzilla films, the previous, I guess you would say the previous ones, not I guess counting Shin Godzilla, but
sorry, I was gonna.
Oh, very Japanese.
Well, I was gonna show you the weird Shin universe that they were pushing briefly with. I love that Kamen Rider is just there.
They made him like grow like 4 times his size. Oh god, now he's the same size as Elvis. Poor fellow.
I don't know. Oh, I forgot that. Oh my god.
Is Kamen Rider become the head?
He must be the pilot, I would assume. Although Ultraman also is a living individual person.
He must become like the head. Yeah.
He is. Oh my god. Alex is into it for sure.
Christmas is still 6 months away.
Anyhow, sorry to interrupt. I was trying to get to that without.
I want to see that movie now. I need the AI to just like make this movie. Yeah, like the previous Godzilla movies, there was not really, like we were saying, much of a focus on the individual characters. There's the main human characters in all those, but there's such a side story. They're more there for like filler, because everybody just wants to watch Godzilla clobber King Ghidorah, or like, Rodan shows up and he helps Godzilla defeat, some random monster, Jet Jaguar and Godzilla team up to fight, Gigan and Megalon. This is where, it's honestly this movie, if there was no Godzilla, you'd be like, oh, this is an interesting film about people trying to pick up their lives following World War II, and then also dealing with some personal I guess you would say demons or regrets about things that
regret and
they
shame.
were thinking that shame, and also just like personal, I would say like personal shame with pretty much the protagonist as to what he was expected of him to do when he was never able to achieve that.
Right.
And so how he tries to remedy that in this film.
And I don't think it's a spoiler to say, because it's established in the very first scene of the film. Our protagonist is basically a kamikaze pilot who abandoned his job. He didn't fulfill his mission to crash his plane into an Allied vessel. He said that there was something wrong with the plane, flew back to an island, and then was like, something's wrong with my plane. Oh, well, I guess I can't kill myself. Mm-hmm. And then the mechanics are kind of like, are you sure there's something wrong with this? Because I don't see anything wrong with this. And so that sets up this interesting narrative for a Japanese film in the 21st century, basically making the failed kamikaze pilot into the hero, while being critical of the kamikaze pilots in general during World War II.
Yeah,
they don't really mince words in this film. They don't take a like, if Anno and Miyazaki, well, maybe not Miyazaki, but if Anno was in charge, the heroic kamikaze pilot he would fulfill his job by the end of the movie to kill himself. This movie takes the position that that's stupid, and that Imperial Japan was treated life as too disposable. I think it's actually a direct quote or something along those lines.
Yeah, there's a scene where there's kind of this there's the captain, I guess you would call him kind of like the captain of that minesweeper boat that goes out into the waters, and basically the main protagonist becomes friends with them and works with them because their job is to basically collect all the floating water mines, sea mines around Japan, and they're using decommissioned ships. And he kind of talks about how all of us banding together for this task, this mission to try to stop Godzilla, is kind of like our way of this is something that we, the people ourselves, are banding together and have decided to do, as opposed to, the government and the bureaucracy telling us that we have to go and do this.
Right. Mm-hmm. And it's one point you were making earlier that I wanted to touch on is a chunk of this film is just post World War II life in Japan and rebuilding from the ashes of World War II, and to the point where you get halfway through the movie, Godzilla hasn't shown up, and you're kind of like, oh, I want to know what happens to this little abandoned, like, fractured family that's being constructed here. And that's like that. Just the characters are enough to keep you interested without Godzilla even arriving.
Yeah, that's like I said, like it is like, apart from Godzilla showing up in the very beginning, and then halfway through, I think he makes like really like 3, maybe 4 appearances, like rampage segments in the film. I mean, but everything else is just watching like people get together, getting to know each other, trying to reestablish and restart a semblance of normalcy in life after this, which we don't really get many Western audiences, possibly even Japanese audiences, don't really get many shows or films that illustrate and show that type of period of time in Japan's history. It kind of heralds back to me to the first, what was it? Battles Without Honor.
We talked about that on the show too.
Yeah, where it shows like, them trying to get back together and like, I think it's like Osaka or something where it takes place, which is kind of, it's an interesting thing that we don't really get to see.
Yeah, and part of that makes everything even more tragic. I remember when I was watching it in the theater, and this is partially just because I'm old and sensitive now, but I felt so bad for these people who had survived World War II. Fire bombings, nuclear bombs, they made it through all of this, and then they get killed by a giant lizard. Yeah. And it just felt so unfair and hopeless, which is part of the title. Godzilla -1 is a reference to Japan being in the negatives after World War II. They're less than zero, basically. And it just made the whole experience more tragic in a way, because they're trying to rebuild only to get eradicated again by Godzilla. The big thing is the effects is what got it the Academy Award. And it's fascinating to see. There's a great little making of special effects thing that they just posted on YouTube leading up to the Academy Awards that shows it was like, I think it was like 37 people was the effects crew. And the big thing was that the director was the director of the film, writer-director of the film, was also the special effects supervisor. And so everything was a streamlined process, and it's not how, Marvel or Hollywood in general does it, where you've got a director that's there really to direct the actors, and then the effects group is an entirely separate entity that in a lot of times operates on its own accord. So it really shows in the effects work how having that kind of streamlined process leads to no wasted time, no wasted effort, and also the funny thing is that they were a group that kind of made the best out of their limited options, where Hollywood will build giant sets and then green screen around it. These people had like 10 feet of a boat and then just put them on it. They couldn't do hydraulics, so they moved the camera instead of moving the boat. And it's all like old school Hollywood practical effects. With a CG background.
It wins again. Yeah. And it shows like the example where you gave with the green screen, where a while back I had visited you and I got to see one of those production stages at your workplace that they use to do like the you could change it into any background.
The LEDs, you mean?
Yeah, that type of that like thing, and that's what I believe they use like a more advanced version or whatever for the Mandalorian. And it's like, okay, that's cool, but it's like it reminds me of Ian McKellen on the set of Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. But this is, I'm looking up here on they had like a budget of just a little over $10 million, and if the budget's tight and the money needs to be spread out very thinly, it's more enjoyable and more fulfilling watching a behind the scenes for a film that showing their special effects like this, as opposed to just like, oh, look at the side, look how big we made this thing because we're gonna have such a huge like green screen and we're gonna put this stuff and stuff, and it's like, okay, and then like the actors are just like, they're just like going through the motions doing stuff, as opposed to like the crew and the actors trying to make everything work and come together and such without any of that fancy stuff.
That's one of the great things in the behind the scenes, is that they show the actors, how much the actors contributed to it, where they're supposed to be moving with the waves, but nothing's moving but them and the camera. They have to fake all of it, and I didn't
like Star Trek.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
また大きな波で揺れる船を撮影するとき、本来ならば油圧シリンダーにセットを丸ごと乗せて撮影することが一般的ですが、我々の予算ではそれは許されませんでした。そのためクレーンの動きとキャストのアクションを組み合わせたトリック撮影をし、その素材をデジタルで延長し、まるで本当に船が揺れているかのようなショットを作り上げました。
I thought that it all worked great. I didn't think that it came across like cheap, that they were like, like Star Trek, where they showed the stationary camera and everyone's just kind of shaking back and forth. It didn't come across like that at all. It all looked fantastic. And there are like tons of like major effect shots that are all CG. But like, for example, just really quick, what I'm talking about is, so this is the boat, the practical part of the boat that they built. Now in Hollywood, they would have like half of the entire boat built. And so that's the boat that's practical, and then that's what they do with it. Like that's really cool. That's fun. And I'm good for them. I think that they deserved. It was funny watching when they showed like who was the other nominees for the Academy Award, and either they did it deliberately or it just was like a bad year. But a lot of the options they showed versus Godzilla looked terrible. Mm-hmm. I remember they showed Mission Impossible shot, and it was just really bad. And maybe more of Mission Impossible was better than that, but what they showed was pretty terrible.
Yeah. Well, it was, all the testament and the work that was put into this by the film crew and the studio and then the actors and such. It basically worked out for them because it was the highest grossing Godzilla movie in history so far, and then it was also, I think it was like, it came in third for like the highest grossing film in 2023 after like Oppenheimer and Barbie and stuff like that. So it's
I don't know if that's true. It didn't make that much. I mean, I don't know. Maybe, Godzilla.
That's what I'm looking at.
Are you looking at worldwide box office? Godzilla worldwide box office is $529 million.
Oh, I'm sorry. Third highest grossing Japanese film.
There we go. I was going to say that it was big, but it wasn't like that. I mean, $529 million for a Godzilla movie is huge, especially that's the other thing. Subtitled film. Subtitled Japanese film makes that much money, and that's when I always get aggravated when people are like, "Ooh, Americans won't watch subtitles." Americans will watch subtitles if they're into the movie. The problem is that most subtitled movies are for weird art weirdos like me, not for the general public. Yeah. So that's why Americans are like, I don't want to watch it. It's subtitled. Mm. If you give them something exciting, they'll watch it with the subtitles.
Yeah. I did. Korean guy bullshit. Yeah. Interesting thing. The plane that the guy flew, the main protagonist, it was a Japanese A6 carrier fighter.
Here's the military otaku coming out now.
Well, it was a Japanese Zero, the Mitsubishi one, and when we went to in 2016, there's like the National Science and Technology Museum in Ueno. I got to see one of the last remaining ones in the world that's on sudden. Erica was able to take a picture of me with it. I think it was, I don't remember what camera it was. I think it was like on our Nikon Coolpix. I have to try to find that picture somewhere. But if you're ever there in the country, because they don't really have, they don't really have many of them. It's still in existence for obvious reasons. And then the plane that he flew at the very end, Shikishima, I think his name was called like a Shinden, and it was like a prototype plane that existed. And I think it's like the original one was like taken by like the US, and then it got put someplace in some museum or some warehouse and stuff. So it was one of those weird, like towards the end of the war kind of prototype weapons that everybody pretty much was having. They're very futuristic for the time period and stuff. So it was a real plane, which is kind of neat.
The score on this is really good. The moment when they begin their operation with the two boats and the Godzilla theme starts playing, perfect. But yeah, lots of good character moments, lots of redemption, lots of very like Japanese reflective moments of ideologies and the changing of
their society and such. How
their outlook on humans and Japan's place in the world and all of these things. It's like it was a very introspective, very well constructed movie. One spoiler thing I have to point out, just because I see people complain about it. People get mad that he didn't die at the end. That our main character doesn't actually sacrifice his life and
follow through with the kamikaze samurai type of.
And to me, it seems pretty obvious thematically why they didn't go that route. Not just from a let the good guy win and get the girl at the end, but like the whole thrust of the film is leaving these outdated ideas behind that Imperial Japan was clinging to. And so you have that demonstrated perfectly with the engineer who's like, well, there's one engineer who's like, they were going to put ejection seats in, but they thought it was too expensive or something.
Yeah. And then because that particular that model of plane was originally designed as a cheap homeland defense plane with whatever purpose. It's like it's a TIE fighter basically.
So there was like there's the one criticism that the Japanese government was too cheap to even give the pilots an option to survive. Then at the end you have the engineer who's like holds him accountable for not following through on his job. But then when given the opportunity to provide an escape lever for the pilot, he does. And he says, don't die. Like this, like use this because this is how we need to live now. And this is what the world's like now. So don't kill yourself over this. So if he would have killed himself in the end over it to beat Godzilla, it would have undermined the message of the film, which was that you can do your duty without giving up your life. It just seemed like people who were it's like getting ramped up in the Hollywood and to be fair, plenty of Japanese films and anime do the same thing, but getting ramped up in the heroic sacrifice instead of the message and the idea behind the story. So it just was irking me when I would see that complaint. But anyway, how many pots of gold would you give Godzilla -1?
I would give Godzilla -1, 2.
How many? Oh wow,
3 and a half pots of gold.
Brilliant.
From Team Shin.
You just needed like a little Evangelion, and you would have had them. Do you have an Evangelion action figure?
No, they were in my parents' basement, and unfortunately, the plastic that they're made out of got very
warped
and brittle, and they did not make it, unfortunately. But we have the legendary trio here.
Yeah, it's the live. You've got the live action trio there.
Yeah.
I wholeheartedly agree. I would be tempted. I'll put it this way: if I'm judging it just in the scope of film, period, cinema, 3.5 pots of gold.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm judging it in the course of Godzilla movies, like
easy 4.
It's a 4 out of 4 for sure.
Yeah,
like it's, and I mean 3.5 is a very good thing for this movie. I mean the fact that you can make a movie about a giant lizard that shoots atomic breath and make me a little misty-eyed in some places,
right?
And really enthralled with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty good accomplishment.
Yeah. It's the way you can do it is that you're more into the story. You kind of get to a point where like you just don't even think or care about Godzilla in a Godzilla movie, but it's done in a good way that you kind of forget about Godzilla, because we all love it when he shows up and just stomps all over the place. That's going to happen. But where it's like I said, previous Godzilla movies, you had to slosh through all the basically filler, pointless stuff to get to the good stuff.
Like I appreciate how experimental and weird Shin Godzilla is, and I really enjoyed that when I saw it. And just as an Anno fan, I feel a little guilty that I liked this one significantly more than that one. But this was just a harrowing adventure film that had wonderful characters, a fine message, and just was kind of a full package adventure movie that I really, and lots of people really responded to. So
it was definitely a good, solid hero's journey of redemption and finding one's self-worth when you start off being like a pariah in a sense in a society, and making up for it and such.